to see this. So my Teradata is running. I'm starting with the Teradata administrator. TD admin is the user ID I would like to use. So it got connected. So now you are the DBA and you got a request to create a new user from the new developer who joined in your application. Okay, so he sent a request to you to get his user ID created. Right? He may use several ways. He may use some internal mechanism of SharePoint to request you, or he may simply send an email. So there are several ways how a developer will communicate with application DBA based on the organizations. Okay? So somehow you got a request to get a user created for him as he joined new in the application. So what we do? Okay, the typical way is sorry. Okay, you open the Teradata administrator. See the tools menu here. In the tools you have create, and within the create you have all the objects what you can create. You can create a database, you can create a table, you can create a user, profiles, roles, user defined data types, authorizations. Okay. So let us see, if a user requested you to create a user, then you will use this tool Teradata administrator to create a user. So click on user, then give him a username. Let's suppose is the first user, and the owner. Owner is the object which contributes space for the user. For let us suppose I would like to create this first user from this is admin. Generally we don't create anything from the DBC. From DBC there should be a database sysadmin or sysdba, so that from sysdba onwards we'll start our application databases. Okay? For example, here now I am using the sysadmin as the parent or the owner, the immediate parent owner. Then password, let me use the same name, first user. The same username I have given as the password, first user. The pump space I want to give it as some 1 MB, spool space 1 MB, temp space 1 MB. Account, so this is the account what we have to provide at the time of user creation. Okay. What it specifies, is it a highly severe user or high resource user or low resource user or medium resource user? That means priorities. Okay, we generally call it as priorities. Okay, so basically we have 4 types of priorities. Okay. It starts from the low priority, medium priority, high priority, and the rush. Rush is more than high. These are 4 basic priorities we have. So see, account ID, the $L represents the user has a low priority. It means, what it means to Teradata is, it contributes 1 CPU cycle to process the request which is submitted by this user. 1 CPU cycle. If the query can be resolved within 1 CPU cycle, it will be resolved. If it requires more than 2 to 3 cycles, then it has to wait for some more time, where it has to get back the CPU cycle again. And if it is a medium priority, $M is the character through which you can give him the medium priority, and he gets 2 continuous CPU cycles for his request. And $H is the high, he would get 4 continuous CPU services to resolve his queries. Similarly, the rush would get 8 continuous CPU cycles. Okay, you can see the usage here. Who uses this? The critical queries, which should be answered at the same moment, should be given as a rush. Okay. The high priority, the OLTP queries, where the customers are waiting for do their transactions. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So we have OLTP queries, which we generally give high priority, and then the medium priority, and these are low priority, where we give batch schedulings, which will run out of business hours, and there will be a particular SLA agreed, so that we can give low priority also for some users, so that they can apply the batch process. So based on the work or the responsibility the user should have, we will assign the corresponding priorities to them. And whenever you are assigning the priority, these are the CPU services those particular requests would get. Okay. So now when we are creating the user, the first character should be the priority levels. So how we would give this priority levels? $H represents high priority we are trying to give to him. Or if I give $L, that means it is a low priority. So for now, let us give a high priority to this user, first user, and then we have to append the account string expansion to this account ID. What is this account string expansion? When we create a user, we have a requirement to track his activities, isn't it? As a DBA, we have to monitor what he is doing. Actually, he intended to do this particular task, and after some time, if he started doing something else which is not expected, it should be monitored by the DBAs. Right? So for the monitoring purpose, we have to add some extra string called account string expansion, so that we can use this particular string to track his activities which are logged in the DBA tables, DBC tables. Okay. So what is this account string expansion? Let's see. Okay. We may use a date to track his activities. Okay. For a single day, what he has executed, how many CPU cycles he has consumed, how many IOs he did, how much queue he has in his tables, or how much queue he executed in his queries. All these things we have to monitor by a day basis, suppose. So we have to consolidate all his activities at a day level, and we have to report it somewhere in the DBA activities. Right? So if that is the scenario, you use a $D, so that you can track his activity at a day wise. Or if your requirement is to track his activities at each hour level, so each hour how much CPU he is consuming, or each hour how many IOs he is doing. So if you want to monitor at each hour basis, then you give a $H as an account string expansion. Similarly, the time, it means each second level you are tracking his details, and the long timestamp along with year, dates, hours, everything is tracked here. I means the host ID, the session number, request number, everything is logged along with his activities. Okay, here if you give date, the day will be appended to his account activities. Okay. Hour means hour is appended with the activities, which hour, in which hour he is doing this operation. Similarly, if you give a I, it adds everything, the host ID, the session in which he has executed these queries, and the request numbers, request IDs, everything is captured. Okay, if you give $S, the session number will be appended along with the account string so that you can aggregate them at a session level. So in this particular session, how much resource he has consumed. So based on the reportings, what we generally produce by end of month or end of week, we may assign a proper account string expansion to the accounts. So if you increase the granularity, what is the granularity? If you want to see the day level usage or a hour level usage or a second level usage, based on the granularity you put, the number of rows inserted in the DBQLs, that is database query logging databases, okay, which are used for tracking the usages, those tables will be filled up with those many number of rows. Okay, so we have to reasonably find out, okay, how we have to track a user activities. Is it a hour level, is it a date level or a session level, okay, so that we can estimate what the resources he expected to be consumed and what the resources he supposed to consume. Okay, so those things we can track by giving a proper expansion strings along with the account IDs. So if you see here, it asks you what level of granularity you want to track his activities. So let's suppose date level, and I want to add a hour also, each day by adding each hour. So what is the lowest granularity here? Each hour. So for each hour, it will try to consolidate his usage and track it in the DBQLs. And if you want, you can append your application name, so that for all the rows which are inserted in DBQL, you can query them with a where clause of the account ID like app name, so that you can easily filter out the remaining records and you can concentrate on your application related data. Okay, so you can give any string here. So this is how generally we give the account IDs. Okay, the first character in the account ID is the priority, and the remaining are the account string expansions. Account string expansion may be at the granular level, how you have to track the activities of the user, and you may append some user defined strings also, so that you can filter out while providing the reports of the usage. And then the default database. It means when you first time log in, or whenever you log in with this user, what should be your default database. Okay, for our application, sysadmin or whatever, samples is its default database. Okay, when I give samples, here we have samples database. If I specify samples here, what does it mean? Whenever this first user logs in, his default database would be samples. What is the purpose of having default database? He can query the objects of that samples database without qualifying with the database name. So whatever tables, whatever views, macros exist in the samples database, he can query without prefixing the database name with the table names. If you want to access any other objects in other databases, he has to completely qualify it with the database name dot table name. But in this default database, what is the advantage? He can access them without prefixing the database name. Okay, so we generally give the frequently used database by this particular user. Okay, he belongs to this application called samples. Then I am providing the samples as his default database. So whenever he logs in, it would be the default, and he can access the objects of samples without prefixing the database name. Then this profile. Okay, we will talk about this profile. We have a detailed topic of profiles and the roles. Okay, we'll specify profile and role in case if you want. And default general startup string. Okay, default general means the journal database where it has to start the journal. If you use journal, the before journal or after journal, you can specify a particular database which is dedicatedly noting all the journals, or you can give the journal option at the database level so that you can provide the user level or database level, the parent at the owner, the journals are accepted, then within that user whatever childs we are creating, they can also have the journals noted. Otherwise sometimes what happens, for all the journals we create a dedicated database. Whatever journals you record for any object, all the journals should be placed in the journal databases. Okay? If there is a configuration such a way where you have a journal database separately, you can mention those default journals. Okay? All these are comments, not mandatory. You may use it or not. Okay? Before journal and after journal or dual journals, you may use any of them. Fallback option. If you want to have a fallback protection for this user, you can have a fallback. Then use a create button here. See the query. The create username from sysadmin with so and so pump space with the password, school space, temporary space, account ID, startup string, default database, fallback, no before journal, no after journal. How I got this query? Because here you see one button here in toolbar. You have to enable it so that whatever operation you do, before executing it, it will show you the backend query, backend SQL, so that you can verify it and you can change it if you want, then you can execute it. Just to enable to see the query before actual execution, you have to click on this button in the toolbar so that it will show you the query before execution of the activity. And if you are fine with this, you can execute it. So here create completed. So we have successfully created the user called first user. Okay, so now as a DBA we have created this user by analyzing his usage and profiles and everything. And then what you do, you will inform that user that you got the user ID created, you can log in with your username. Okay, now let us switch our role to the user who has requested for creation of this user, and that user got his user ID created by the DBA. What he do with his user ID? He has to log in through SQL Assistant and see if he able to log in or not. Right? So before doing that, what he has to do? He has to create a DSN for his user ID. So let's see how we create a DSN. So I open an SQL Assistant, connect it, or first I need to create a DSN for the first user, right? So let us create the DSN. How to create? Tools in the SQL Assistant, define ODBC data source. Click on this. So it will show you all the existing DSNs, and now I wanted to create the first user's DSN, right? So I have to go to add, and when you install Teradata client utilities with the ODBC, you can see a Teradata ODBC in your all possible ODBC list. So select Teradata ODBC, finish it. Now it will ask you the details of the DSN. What are the details? What is the DSN name? First DSN I'm creating. Description, something with which you can identify what it is. And what is the server name? What is the demo server name? Local TD. Or you may mention the IP address 127.0.0.1. for the local machine. As the name of the server, the demo server installed is local TD by default for everyone. You can use the local TD as DSN name. Then username. What is the username we created as a DBA? First user. And the same password I used. First user. Click on OK. Yeah, and you can mention default database here also if you want. Okay, at the creation of user also I have mentioned it, but at the DSN level also you can mention it. It will be overridden whatever we mention in the user creation. And account string also you can mention here default. So let's click on this. Okay. Now the DSN is created. Now I want to connect to that DSN which I just created. So what is the DSN? First DSN. See, first DSN. Click on OK. So I will be connected through the user called first user through the DSN, first DSN. Okay. See, what is username? First user. What is the DSN name? First DSN. So I am able to log in. So now I am trying to access my application related data. Select star from samples dot some table, whatever table it exists. Oh, there are no tables, no views, nothing. Okay, so I am the first user in the application. Let's suppose now I want to create a table. Create table, first table with column 1 as character of 20 or character of 5, column 2 as integer. Primary index is column 1. Where it will be created? I didn't mention any database name here. See, we tried to create in the samples because it is a default database we mentioned at the time of creation of the user. So it tried to create the database table in the database called samples. But it says the user does not have create table access to the database samples. Okay. So you don't have the access. So again, what he do as a user, the first user, he has to send an email again. I able to log in through this first user, but I am not able to access the application related tables. I am not able to create or I am not able to use the application tables. So he will send a request to grant him the access to see the tables or create the tables in the database. Okay. Then what he does as a DBA, again we have to switch your role to DBA. You got the request, you saw the mail, and now you have to grant him the access. Okay. How do you grant the access? Tools, grant the object rights. Right? Tools grants the object rights. So it will pop up a little window here. You can see on what database we have to grant him the access. We will see for what database he has requested. For samples he has requested. Okay. And at the database level we have to give the access or at each individual object level. Okay. He has requested at the database level so that all the tables and views he has to access. If you want to restrict him at a individual object level, you can restrict him. Now I am giving a database, and to which user we have to grant the access? The first user, where he is, select this first user. And before granting, if you would like to see what all accesses he has, just use the display button. Click on display. Nothing is enabled here. That means he don't have any accesses on the samples database. So now you are going to grant him the access. What accesses you want to give him? Select access, insert, update, delete, statistics collection, macro executions, execute procedures, whatever he requires in his daily application activities. Create tables, create views, create macros, create other databases within him, users, okay, drop access, or if you want to give everything to him, just click on all, simply you will select everything. Otherwise you can manually give him. Okay, for now let me give all the access to him. So once you select whatever required accesses you want to give to him, you have the grant button enabled, so that you can click on this grant and you will get the query what internally will be executed. Grant the accesses, so it is very complex. Let us identify by giving some simple accesses. Okay, so these are the access. Let's suppose he has to create the table and insert and select. So this is the only activity he has to do. Now I'm granting. See, grant, select, insert, create table on samples to the first user. So this is the SQL which will be executed. Okay, even you execute through a Teradata administrator or a stored procedure through SQL query assistant or BTech, whatever it may be. This is the SQL to be executed finally. Okay, so once you are okay with this grant, just click on this. So the grant completed. So you able to give the accesses to the first user on the samples database. Okay. So now again you communicate with the developer that yes, I have granted accesses on the samples, so that you now you can create and insert the data and you can select the data. So now again let's switch to the role developer. So what a developer does, you would try to create the table. It's taking time. Take this time. Yeah, about it. Just one more moment. Okay, the first place. Let it take its time. Let's see here. Okay. So we have seen the account string expansions. Okay, and all these account related details. Okay, what account he has, what is the priority he has. But to see that information, we have some data dictionary views called DBC account info or DBC amp usage. Okay. So with this granularity of tracking the resources by this user, you may use these two views to see what the account strings assigned to each user and what are the resources, the amp usages by each user by using these dictionary views. Okay. And see an example of create user here. We also created a user with a similar syntax, right? Create user from the parent with the password, with perms pool, all of things, and account ID. We have given one account ID, but there is an option you can give multiple account IDs to a single user. at the time of user creation. Okay, so how many number of account IDs you provide? Okay, you can give n number of account IDs, but defaultly the first account ID will be enabled always if you don't specify otherwise. Okay, if I log in with this username without specifying any account string, the first account string, whatever is aligned at the time of user creation, that will be activated. Okay, we know how to log into the BDQ, right? So this is the statement dot log on, the host name, the username, comma, and the password. So this is what we generally use. If I use this syntax and log in through BDQ, what will be my account ID here? The first account ID mentioned, that is medium priority with no account string expansion. I know I don't want to track him, so it is only the priority. But if I want to set his priority with high for this session, what I need to do, after the password with a comma within the single quotes, I have to mention the account ID here, the $H_9038. See here, this is the way how you activate your account priority at the time of user logging in. If you don't want high priority, you want a default one, you can just simply log on with your username and password. You will get a medium priority, which is the first account string specified at the time of user creation. But if you want high priority for this session, then you have to explicitly mention it at the time of user login. Okay. Or I have already logged in with the medium priority, that is default, and while I am executing the queries, I felt that I should get my high priority. Then after logging into this session also, you have an option to activate your possible account strings. How you can do that? By using the set session account equal to the account ID. Okay, you already logged in through the SQL Assistant, okay, with normal logging process. So you got your default account ID activated, and within the session you want to upgrade it to the high priority, or you have to get some lower priority which was aligned here. Okay, only the accounts which are aligned to you, to those account strings only you can switch into. Okay, if the rush priority is not aligned to you, you can never go into rush priority yourself. Okay, so what are the possible priorities here? Mediums and high, and with different account string expansions. Okay, so now I wanted to make it high, as it is already mentioned in the user creation. Okay, I can use the set session account equal to the account ID, and you can decide whether this priority should exist for only this particular request what I am going to execute right now, or to the entire session. That means all these equals which are being executed during the session. Okay, either for request or the for session, you can decide. Okay, so during the login you have an option, or after the login you have an option to switch your account strings. Okay, and you can decide whether this account string should be activated for a single request, that means single SQL, or the entire session till I log off from the session. Okay, these are the options what you can do with the account IDs. And the accounting views, the usage of accounting views you can see here. Select star from the dbc.account.info where account name like high priority. So you want to see the high priority users who are there in the application. So you can use this query and can get all the user names with their account names and the account string expansions, and if it is coming through a user or a profile. And you can track his AMP usages. As this user with this account string, he has occupied these many AMP CPU times, the disk IOs, everything can track. Okay, this particular user TFA CT03 has 3 different account IDs aligned to him. So sometimes he log into the $M9038 account ID, and sometimes with $S ampersand S DH, that is session, day and time. Sometimes it may be only day and hour. So with what account strings, it is low priority, if you observe. So with low priority he occupied only these many CPU times. With the medium priority he occupied this many number of CPU times. Like this you can generate a report at the end. So what a user is doing. So there are some dedicated DBAs, okay, who are called as risk DBAs, DW risk DBAs, okay, the W risk DBAs. So these risk DBAs monitor all these views generally. If 1 or 2 DBAs would be there to do all these particular operations. Okay. So they will track the usage levels, and if there is any exceptional usage by the user which is not supposed to, then they will ask the corresponding application DBAs, okay, what this user is supposed to do, and he is having exceptional rate of usage. Please check with him. Then application DBAs will reach out to the developer and will try to know what the use and how it happened. Okay, this is all the monitoring purpose activities what we can do, and the account string is to get the priority levels also as well. Okay. And here let us see again. Okay, so we have logged in with the first user. We are trying to create the user table. Okay, probably the samples database was locked due to some activities. Okay, let us try the retail dot first table. I would like to create a table in. So again, he don't have access. So again, he will request the DBA to grant him the access on the retail database. So let us see. Provide on retail. Okay, at database level. If you want to give at any table level, you can select the table. It will show you what are the tables exist in that database, and you can select the tables to which you want to grant access, and you can grant it. Or if you want to get it database level, you can select the database level and you select the accesses what you want to provide it to him. Grant it. Grant, select, insert, create table on retail to first user. Grant it. So grant completed. Now we inform the user, yes, you got access on retail also now. So now what he does, you try to create table completed. So earlier he was not having access, as he requested DBA, and as a DBA we have granted the access whatever he required based on his usage patterns, and he got the access. Now we can insert the data. I'll use something. Insert. Be able to insert because we have granted insert access also to him. And let me try to update it. Update retail dot first table set column 1 equal to BBB, something. Yeah. Update also completed. Did we give update access? To see what all access he has, display, select, insert and table. It should be able to update. Okay, and let us try to delete. Okay, so the first user was already created and his access was not revoked earlier. But it should not be. detail database, first user. Okay. Anyway, so this user was already existing earlier, so he got some accesses explicitly. I will show you what are the explicit accesses. So any questions, anyone up to here? The account string, account ID, the views used for tracking this information, how we can upgrade its account IDs during the session and during the logons. Everyone clear? Okay. So here you can see the privileges.
Manohar.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, Manohar. How to add the multiple account IDs?
How to add the multiple account IDs? Yes. For creation of the user, or let us modify the user. We already have the user, so we use that same user. Which user? Sysadmin. So here, if you want to see the user, you have to refresh this window. F5 is to refresh it. So in sysadmin we have created the first user, right? So for the first user, I want to modify. So here you can put a comma and give one more account string $L. Yeah. So now modify it. See, he has multiple account strings. Modify it. So by default, he will be having the high priority, and in case if you want, he can switch to low. Okay. Okay. Now let's see the access and privilege. Okay, what are the important things what we need to know about the privileges? Okay. So a privilege is the right of specific user to perform a specified operation. Okay, whenever I say I access right, that means what? The action what he can perform on the object. So these are the possible operations what we can do on the objects. Right? Can create, can drop, can select, insert, index, update, execute, delete, checkpoints, dump and restore. This is for archival process. Yeah, and show statistics. These are the new access rights they added. Okay, so earlier once you have select access, you would defaultly have show access also, but here they have separated from Teradata 13 onwards. Okay, the show access is different and the read access of the data is different. And statistics, collection of statistics is different. Okay, these are the possible operations what you can have on the objects. And at object levels, either you can provide any of these access at the database level or user level, or at the individual table level, view level, macro, trigger, procedure, function level, or within the table or view you can grant or revoke accesses based on the columns also. Okay. So in a single table, let's suppose we have 100 columns, but this particular user should see only 10 columns out of this 100 columns. You can restrict him by selecting only those columns from the table to grant him the access. So these are the levels of accesses what you give, and these are the possible accesses you can activate on the objects. And In this scenario, we have the sysdba, and the sysdba user has created a database called accounting, let's suppose. So sysdba within himself, he has created the accounting. So sysdba is the creator, sysdba is the owner, and accounting is the object which is being created from the space of sysdba, the child. Okay, when you do this operation, there are certain accesses given to the creator and the created object. Okay, when sysdba created the database called accounting, the accounting will also get some default accesses on accounting itself, and the sysdba as a owner and creator, he also gets some accesses on the accounting, right? So accounting can do all these operations within itself: create table, drop table, views, macros, triggers, select, insert, update, everything it can do. So they're all yellow color accesses. Yeah. And these accesses are given to the owner also by default. Okay, so all these accesses are defaultly given to both the owner and the child. And along with these, the owner would get some extra requests, some extra accesses. What are those extra accesses which are only given to the owner but not to the created object? Are these, the green color access. Yes, create database, drop database, create user and drop user are given only to the sysdba, so that sysdba can create a database within the accounting, but accounting cannot create a database within itself by default. Okay, as a sysdba, you can grant the accounting an access to create users within itself or to create databases within itself. You have to explicitly grant it. Yeah, those rights are called as explicit rights, and the accesses which they defaultly get are called as automatic rights. Yeah. As a creator and as a owner, you will get all these accesses, but to the owner you will get only, you get these access also along with all automatic rights. And if you have to provide these accesses also to the object, we have to explicitly provide it. Those are called as explicit rights. You can see in this scenario the DBC, the sysdba, and within sysdba we have a human resource and an accounting. And as a sysdba, we have granted user access on human resource to the accounting. These two are peers, right? So by default, accounting cannot create any objects in human resource, but as a sysdba, you have granted access to accounting to create users in human resource. What type of right it is? Explicit right, right? Explicitly we have granted it. And the accounting got access on human resource to create the users, and it has created the database personal in human resource. So human resource become the owner, account become the creator. See, human resource is the owner, immediate owner, and anyway DBC is DBA also the owners. Human resource is immediate owner, a parent, immediate parent you can call, and accounting is the creator. And as the creator or the owner, they would get all default and automatic rights on personal. So in this total scenario, the accesses on the personal to human resource and accounting are called as automatic rights, and the access, the sysdba, which has granted explicitly with the grant statement on the human resource to the accounting, is called as the explicit access. Sorry. Okay. So all these accesses are tracked in particular database views, the DBC views. All rights is a view in DBC which tracks all these writes, whether automatic or explicit, to all the objects, whether it may be database or a user. For each object, every write is tracked in dbc.allWrites. You can see what object has what accesses. And we have one more view called dbc.userWrites, where it tracks all the user related automatic and explicit accesses. Yeah. And we have user granted rights, which tracks only the explicit rights of the users. So provides information about rights which the current user explicitly has granted to other users. It means since DBA has granted to accounting, so this information is tracked in the user granted rights view. Okay, you can track it. What object has what all accesses on which object. Is it a explicit or an automatic? Okay. So any questions? Let us see one revoke operation also. Okay, I want to revoke the accesses. Please be on mute. Waiting noise. Okay. So on the retail, I want to revoke accesses of the first user. How do we revoke? Try to display them and then select whatever you want to revoke. Click on revoke. So revoke, select on retail from first user. If there is any request that the user is switching to some other application and he wanted to revoke all his existing access and he want to get some new accesses, then what to do? We have to revoke his existing accesses like this, and you can grant new accesses if you want. Okay, so we have revoked it, select operation, and now if you see, the user does not have select access, and he can do updates. Let us try to insert. Insert completed because he has insert access, obviously. Even once we have insert access, that means all write operations also we can do. Yeah, update and delete, which are write related operations. Yeah. So either insert, update, delete. If you give, that means all write operations we can do, and read operation you can restrict it. The user does not have select access. This is how you can grant the access and you can revoke the access. And the creation of the user, and similarly creation of the database. Yeah, let's see tomorrow how we can create a database. It is a less complex than the user with less number of parameters. You can see that. So this is today's concept of users and accesses. Yeah, different types of accesses, different user parameters, account strings and account string expansions. Any questions? And I placed this document in our share folder and I provided access to everyone. Please let me know if you are not able to access. Okay, fine. So those who want to continue for the development, please be online, or I will close this line. Please join again because of some administrative activities. Okay? Please join it again. I will leave from otherwise.